Hello, heathens, and welcome back to Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your ever balancing host, Megan Angus. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Life on Earth 2024. Am I right? I think I am. I'm going to say that I'm right on this one. Okay. Let's get into this, you guys. First and foremost, where are we? We are in 2024 Litha season, waxing moon in Libra. This is our lunar week 22. I finally did the count and figured it out. That's where we are. We are first and foremost sending peace and protection and power to all oppressed peoples around the planet, all people who are subjugated by imperialism around the planet, victims of political violence, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Remember? Yeah. Uh, all right. We're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into it. I began recording the podcast, and then stuff happened, and I paused and reflected on what I wanted to actually say for this week. But okay. Before we actually get into the stuff, let me say the stuff I'm supposed to say at the beginning, which is thank you so much to my patrons who support this work and make it possible for me to offer these podcasts for free and the classes on YouTube for free and all of the other stuff that I do for free. Uh, Thanks, patrons. If you want to support this work, subscribe to my Patreon. It is truly the best way that you can support this work. Thank you so much for doing so. Folks that sub at $23 level, which is an outrageous amount of material, for 23 bucks a month. You also get readings with me throughout the year to ground yourself into the wheel and the many cycles that we are traveling through at any given time. My books also are open for July and August. I think they are. Before I post this, I'll check and make sure that's true. Get yourself a tarot reading or an astrology reading today. We are halfway through the year. This is a really fantastic time to check in on where are you in your plans, where are you in your projects, are you still on track? Are you still on course? How are things going? And or we could say that we are a quarter of the way in, right? We have moved through spring. We are now into the heart of summer. So again, great time for checking in, making sure that you're still on course, what's coming up for this season and the next season, etc., etc. I will be announcing our next class dates soon. Trademark. As well, I will be announcing some tarot classes soon. I know I've been saying that for a while now, but swear to God, classes are coming soon. If there is something in particular that you're hoping that I will teach, send me an email, send me a message, check me out, and let me know that you're looking for something in particular, and if it's something I can teach, I will. Or if I'm planning on offering it soon. Okay. First and foremost, before we get into the absolute shit show that is this week, let us ground into the energy of where we are. We have officially entered summer. I know we've skipped several weeks from our last podcast to now. We are officially in the season of summer. And we are going to move through the signs of Cancer, Leo, and Virgo while we are hanging out in summertime. So, as we move through the first 4 weeks of summer, we are in Litha season and we are in Cancer season. And our witches work as we move through Litha season brings our focus to issues like power, transformation, healing, fertility, with extra focus on things like sexuality and sensuality, the needs of others, commitment, judgment, personal power, the fullness of solar power, transformations, and in particular the transformations that we are undertaking at this time of year are the parts of us that are shifting out of springtime energy, which is very experimental and playful and curious, and shifting into summertime energy, which is more mature and knowing and accepting of responsibility and accepting of the work that it takes to oversee the experiments that we began in spring. When we step into summer, that is a big part of the work that we are doing. Is we are no longer playing at the thing. We're taking it a bit more seriously, and we're committing to it on some level. We're making decisions about what experiments need to be sacrificed and what experiments are going to be embraced and supported and protected. Um, so uh, that's where we're at right now as we move through these first 4 weeks of Litha season. Last week we had our first new moon of summer. That was our new moon in Cancer, a fairly potent new moon. We're still, generically speaking, under the auspices of that new moon, even though we're going to talk about the half moon phase this week. We still have that new moon energy kind of in the air. So if there is anything that you want to really seed or get started, this is a great time. We still have that new moon energy, around us here to support us in our work. Okay. As we move through this portion of the wheel, Litha, for the most part, but as we begin to encroach upon Lunasa season, from July 8th to August 4th, we have the Celtic tree month of Holly. So let's pause here before we get into the definition of this tree. In some pagan traditions, the god energy is witnessed in two forms, the oak king and the holly king. And each of them oversees and takes responsibility for 6 months of the year. The light half of the year is from winter solstice to summer solstice, and it is overseen by the oak king. And then at summer solstice, in some pagan traditions, there is a clash or a battle or a type of competition that happens between the Oak King and the Holly King, and the Holly King wins. And so from summer solstice to winter solstice, we have the dark half of the year, because from this point on, the sun's energy is waning. And the Holly King oversees and guides us and protects us to various degrees as we move through that work of this part of the year. In many pagan traditions, we see this thing. We also don't see it in a lot of pagan traditions. In my opinion, we actually see these dual kings show up in a bunch of different ways. But you got to watch my classes and dig in on my work that I share on Patreon and stuff I've got on my website, because we have no time. There's too much to cover. But a clue is Gemini. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. So as we step into this portion of the wheel, our Celtic tree month is also Holly. So there's an echo there between these magical systems and these mytho-archetypal systems that we're working with. So what's up with our tree month of Holly? What are we doing with that? Well, first and foremost, we've talked about Holly King and Oak King. Holly is one of the 9 sacred woods that are used in need fires and other sacred bonfires that are lit, like at Beltane and really any of the Sabbats. The others being oak, pine, hazel, juniper, cedar, poplar, apple, and ash. In ancient Irish lore, it was also listed as one of the noble trees of the grove, along with birch and alder, willow, oak, hazel, and apple. Obviously, this tree is connected to the Holly King, who, as I just said, is the ruler of the dark half of the year. Holly is connected to work, meditation, spiritual ponderings, and spell crafting. that is focused on balancing the light and dark halves of the self, as well as discovering a new path between those two extremes. Which, you know, let's just take a moment to sit with that metaphor. Yeah. We might be calling on Holly for a little extra overtime work in this particular month. And this tree is utilized in protection magics in general, but especially protection against our enemies, protection against evil spirits, protection against thunder and lightning, and protection against poison. There's a couple of interesting links there in that. Again, I already mentioned Gemini, and you're like, but we're deep in Cancer season. Kind of, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But lightning in particular is deeply connected to Gemini and the twins of Gemini, Castor and Pollux. So there's an interesting connection there. And I think it's interesting that holly would be utilized in protection magic against poison because holly berries are poisonous. So some interesting connections there. As well, holly is connected to magic and spell crafting concerning wisdom, good luck, courage, fortune in general, restoring lost energy and lost vitality, and dream magic. And it was often used to make weapons, and interestingly here, chariot wheel shafts. Whoa, right? That was a new one for me. I learned that that's new for me this year. I was like, wait, what? That's very cool. Why am I flipping out about that? Because, as we just said, we're moving through Cancer season, and the tarot card connected to the sign of Cancer is the Chariot. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Womp womp. Okay, moving on. So digging deeper into the energy of where we are. We're talking about being in summertime. We're talking about being in Cancer season. We're talking about being in the tree month of holly. And in this week, we are working with the waxing half moon in Libra. And it is exact at 22 degrees of Libra, Saturday the 13th at 3:48 p.m. Interestingly enough, because the event, which I will talk about a little bit here in the podcast, happened somewhere around 3:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So quite spicy timing with that. Okay. But before we get into all that, let's just ground again directly into the energy that we're working with on the most fundamental level. When we're working with the waxing half moon, we are at a branch. We are at a fork in the road of our process. We have reached the first point of friction, the first decision that we need to be making, the first point of, like, you know, we could go in this direction or we could go in that direction. Things are starting to get a little complicated. And the waxing half moon is here to help us make good decisions, hopefully, on where to go next. To lend us a little bravery, to lend us a little courage on, oh, this work is starting to get more difficult. Let me lean in to that and like commit myself to that. This moon in Libra is ruled by Venus, who has just entered Leo and is in opposition to Pluto, hanging out at 1 degree of Aquarius. And this moon is bringing a lot of emphasis to the cardinal cross for folks that are working with astrology vocabularies. The cardinal cross is made up of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And these are our 4 signs that kick off each season. So there's an energy there of starting stuff, initiating stuff, instigating stuff, beginnings, seeding things, opening the door and witnessing the new territory therein. So folks with Aries placements, Libra placements, Capricorn placements, Libra placements, did I say all of the things? Cancer, Aries, Libra, Capricorn, might be feeling a little extra pressure right now. Um, Even though this moon is not exactly conjunct the nodes, the south node is traveling through Libra, the north node is traveling through Aries, and so it's those energies are here in the mix as well. Okay, so as I said previously, here we are in summer. The waxing half moon is a moon for adjustment and friction, both with an eye for progress and creation. And I know for some folks, using the word friction in a neutral or positive way might seem strange, but I want you to remember that fire starts from friction. And the reason why tires stick to the road is because of friction. And, the yummiest parts of sex sometimes have a lot to do with friction, and sometimes not so much, right? but but friction is helpful. It's good. It's necessary, even in some places. It also can be uncomfortable and not fun and weird. So it's yes and when we're working with a word like friction. But the waxing half moon, as I said before, is really trying to get us squared away, literally, because the moon is squared to the sun. It's trying to get us squared away in what are we doing, where are we trying to go, and where do we need to kind of double down or get our work done or push a little harder or whatever to make that progress, to create the thing that we're trying to create. Libra is focused on creating harmony, creating balance, and creating beauty. So, cool synchronicity that we are hanging out with the Celtic tree month of Holly. And Holly is something that assists us in finding the balance between the light and the dark. And our Libra moons also can be places where we do work around discovering balance. But I think it's important to note that balance is not stillness. It's not peaceful. I think that that's a mistake that sometimes we can make when we think about Libra symbolism or balancing symbolism in of itself, that it's this like stasis, that it's this like perfectly balanced thing that holds still. No. Balancing is a constantly moving action where we're tipping on one side and then we're tipping back to the other side and then we're tipping back again and back again. And so it's this swinging effect between one side and the other in hopes of finding the middle ground. Okay. So, you know, when we're working with Libra, as I was saying, creating harmony, creating balance, creating beauty, but we totally can get lost in the sauce when it comes to making decisions that might rub folks the wrong way. Libra, on a good day, is very dedicated to the ideas of justice. On a bad day, Libra energy is very dedicated to the idea of keeping things cute, regardless of what is actually healthy for the individuals or the system. It's like diplomacy and appearances above all, regardless of what actually needs to get said. I don't know if that echoes anything that's going on in the world right now. Just gonna put that out there. Okay. All right, so the astrology of this moon, I think, is pretty straightforward. Like, and I'm just talking about the moon itself, the event of this half moon itself. The moon is square to the sun, which is always going to be true for a half moon. But it is also in opposition to Chiron, who has been traveling through Aries for a while. So first, let's remember this specific transit is only going to last for a day or two. Okay. Secondly, we are going to work with moon opposite Chiron once a month, like all of our lunar transits, right? It takes the moon 1 month to go all the way around the sky. So every single month, these lunar transits that we're experiencing them over and over and over again. They're happening all the time. So we want to think also about the context that this is happening within the Cancer lunar cycle. Cancer and the moon concern our emotions, our daily habits, our memories, our perceptions around stuff that we've experienced. And as I previously said, we just had our Cancer new moon last week, and that was our first new moon of summer. Libra is cool with emotions as long as it's all like super feel good stuff. Libra energy can get really uncomfortable or even super avoidant when it comes to difficult or messy or inconvenient emotions. And again, diplomatic displays. Chiron, who, as I mentioned, has been hanging out in Aries for a long time, it's been there since 2018, is opposite this moon. And this asteroid represents our process of taking painful experiences and integrating the wisdom and the holistic understanding that can be found therein. Hopefully. And so let's just take a moment with that. That is way easier to say than it is to do. It is easier said than done to look back at all of the painful things that have happened to us, personally or collectively, and solely focus on the quote-unquote learning opportunities. Right? Come on. We're living this stuff, and it's tough. It's difficult road that we are traveling currently as a species. So, TLDR, this whole combination might make for a day or two where, on a personal level and maybe on a collective level, our discomfort is showing us what needs to be released. Okay? All of that said, I was in the middle of creating this podcast when somebody tried to shoot Trump. Now, this is not the first attempt on Trump's life. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I didn't know that until yesterday. So that immediately was very interesting to me. Like, why is this one particularly special? People have, he's had gun violence around him. Somebody tried to kill him with a forklift one time. People were sending him ricin in letters. Like, there has been multiple attempts on his life over the last, 10-ish years or so. So why are we so fixated on this one in particular? It provides a fantastic distraction from larger events. 9 months, 10 months, and 180,000 plus Palestinian deaths, right? And most Democrats have said nothing about Palestine, let alone the millions of people that are starving or facing wartime in Haiti and Sudan and Mali and the wars in Congo. And I'm supposed to stop everything for one orange ear? Baby, no ma'am. No, we're not doing that. I don't think so. I need you to get focused, okay? Seriously. The first reaction from so many people around this event was, is this real? Is this staged? This has to be staged. This seems so fake. Why is that? We live in the most violent country in the world. There are more guns in this country than there are people. Why are we shocked that anybody gets shot ever, right? Like, what? Like, yeah, of course this guy is a buffoon, and he is the center of controversy and spectacle and ridiculousness at all times. But the idea that somebody shoots somebody else in America, hello? Like, that's not surprising. That's not a shocker. But we have come to a place of very deep mistrust when it comes to the ruling elites and the legacy media outlets that they own and the news, quote unquote, that is dispensed from those legacy media outlets. And that's because we have seen so many things and experienced so many things with our own bodies and our own eyes, and then we have these people literally lying in our faces about what we are seeing and what we have personally experienced. And they're just more than happy to lie directly to us, as if we somehow are just going to forget what we've seen or forget what we've personally experienced. To me, this reflects Neptune's passage through the 29th degree of Pisces, where it has been sort of just camped. We cannot tell what is real or fake anymore. And everything is like phantasmagoric. Everything is so surreal. Everything is a spectacle. Everything is a nightmare. It's a fantasy. It's beyond belief. Does this rile up his fan base? Of course it does. Does this embolden politicians that have sided with him this whole time? Of course it does. But, you know, they and other far-right politicians have been engaging in very violent rhetoric for years. So how is this different now? So while I understand the urge to like dissect the chart of the event, or like dig in on his birth chart and the compositions and like all of that stuff, I get that, and I'm not saying don't do it. What I am saying is I want to personally remind you, these people are not the fucking main characters, as desperately as they want to be. They are not the main characters. This is a circus meant to carry you away on cotton candy nightmares. Let the clowns do whatever they're going to do. And I don't mean this as an excuse to check out. I'm saying this to remind you to stay focused and to stay connected to what is real. We have to be diligent in staying focused on what is real. And what is real? The incredible suffering inflicted around the world by U.S. and Western foreign policy. What is real is the rising cost of living. What is real is your houseless neighbor. What is real is the almost 70 cop cities already built or being built across our country. What else is real? The earth, the air, the ocean, the sky, your community, the sound of a baby's laughter. Those are also real. Okay? So I think the work of this week is to witness how easily we are distracted and pulled into the dream machine. How easily we can get caught up in the petty distractions, and how much we desperately want to be distracted by those ridiculous events. And I'm not saying the government doesn't use moments like this as an excuse to further encroach on our rights and shut down needed services. I'm saying they're going to try to do it either way. And I empathize with the urge to escape. But wouldn't it be cool if we didn't have to escape? Okay. Within the framework of Litha, this week is a moment to think about the effects and the vestiges of nationalism, tribalism, patriotism. How your protective urges get activated and what you're willing to do or what you're willing to shut down in order to feel safe, even if you are not actually safe. And, spoilers, you haven't been for a while. I know a lot of folks are talking about Project 2025 and really wielding that as a bludgeon to force people to vote for one person or another. And what I want to remind you is, it's not that that isn't true, it's that it has been already true and already happening for Black and Indigenous people of America for the last 400 years. So the thing that you are scared of maybe happening is happening and has been happening to millions of your neighbors, your lovers, your friends, your coworkers. Perspective, my friends, perspective. What do I always talk about in Litha? Accepting the responsibility around the stuff that really needs protecting. Coming out of the fantasy bubble and into the real world sucks, but it is deeply called for now. Be brave, my heathens, and face this world. But don't shut down emotionally. You've got to stay present with yourself, stay present with your body, stay present with your loving connections. Okay. You knew the diatribe was coming. You knew the leftist rant was coming. There it is. Okay. So, we're going to do the rest of the podcast kind of old school. We are going to mix all of the stuff together as we go through the week. This is what I will say before I get into it. The astrology of this week has been trumpeted about by astrologers all over the internet. They are very obsessed with the Mars-Uranus conjunction happening, and individual events like what happened yesterday certainly can be described by a transit like this. But let's not forget the 500-pound bombs that are being shipped to Israel and other places around the world, right? There's plenty of explosive elements ramping up globally, whether this singular event happened or not. Okay, so let us take a look at the holy days, the astrology, and the fixed stars for the week of July 13th through July 20th. We start with a brief mention that throughout this month, we are within a month-long celebration dedicated to Mahakali, the great birther, creator, sustainer, destroyer goddess, who is here to lovingly shred us with her teeth into a million pieces so that we can really get our shit together. Thanks, Kali, once again, doing the overtime work. Okay, so 7/13, July 13th, we have our waxing half moon at 22 degrees of Libra. As I said previously, that was exact at 3:48 p.m. Pacific Standard Time later in the day everywhere else around the planet. And when we are doing our Libra lunar body work, we are awakening, activating, adorning, stimulating, and preparing for action the hips, the kidneys, and the bladder. And the kidneys and the bladder are all about filtration and pulling out what is good and sending that back into the system. That's their jobs, is the kidneys in particular, is to enact filtration methods and then pull out what's good and necessary and keep it and send it back into the system. For our plant body work, this is one of those lunar phases for the plant body stuff where there's a little conjecture. So some sources say don't do anything with your plants except focus on aesthetics. So wipe down the leaves, wipe down your pots, give them a good dusting, give them a spin, check on the lighting, check on decorations, that kind of thing. Other sources say this is a great time for planting flowers, specifically for beauty. So either for the aesthetics around your home or your apartment or whatever, or plant friends that we are hoping to work with cosmetically, medicinally, or magically in the future, specifically centered on the idea of beauty. I would throw values in there too. I think we probably need to dial in on that a little bit. Also, planting root crops, very tiny crops, fodder crops. This is a great time for harvesting seeds and roots for replanting later. And of course, as we've talked about previously, all of Litha season is a fantastic time for harvesting herbs and plant allies that are going to be assisting us in food, medicine, and magic throughout the year. Side note to the side note, don't eat anything you can't identify, you freaks. All right. And we are also planting annuals that yield above ground crops, especially our viney crops. So peas, beans, melons, squash, tomatoes, peppers, as well as stuff like cereals and grains and hay and garlic, cucumbers, very important. In fact, we had some holy days recently that were dedicated to Sekhmet, where her priestesses literally sit around and chomp on cucumbers, which I love. So pickle some stuff. This is also a good time for taking cuttings, doing our harvesting, as we mentioned, doing grafting, and harvesting above ground for drying and storage. Okay, what else do we have happening on this day from our Roman friends and ancestors this year, running from July 13th through the 19th? We have the Ludi Apollinaires. So, the Ludi are games. We will see a variety of ludi that are held throughout the year. These were Roman games. Some are short, some are long, some are rather serious, some are very silly and fun. The Ludi Apollinaires actually had a very somber vibe to them, and they were dedicated to Apollo, the sun god. What I think is interesting here is a couple of different things. One, as we get closer to the end of July, August 1st kicks off Lunasa season. And Lunasa is a multi-week festival, also referred to as the Taltian Games, that the god Lugh celebrates and holds in celebration, as funerary games held for his mother, who has just died, or his stepmom, mother-in-law, foster mom, something like that, adopted mom. This is my job. I should probably know that. So interesting that we have this echo between the Western European traditions and the Roman traditions here. They were hanging out quite a bit. Okay. Also happening from July 13th through the 19th from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Karchi Puja. And this is a time that celebrates, it's a week-long festival that celebrates a whole bunch of Hindu gods and goddesses. I think actually it's just gods. And the gods are all taken out from their temples and carried to be washed in holy water from a local stream or a local river, and then they are taken back to the temple. I just think that that's an interesting thing in and of itself, because we're in Cancer season, so water vibes are a big deal. Water symbolism is a big deal. All throughout Litha season, in fact, water symbolism is really big. Rivers, oceans, lakes, cups and chalices and cauldrons holding water, the birth vessel holding water, like all of that stuff, right? So that's just an interesting connection there. But Karchi is derived from the word kaya or kiya, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, which means earth. And the festival marks the cleaning of Ama Pechi, which is the female cycle of the earth goddess. Wink, wink, menstruation, okay? During the festival, no plowing. Wink, wink. No furrowing or tending to the soil is done to give it time to cleanse. So there's something very potent in this week around allowing things to rest, allowing things to bleed, and allowing things to cleanse in that regard. Okay. Also, July 13th, from our modern pagan traditions, we have the Feast of the Moon. Very appropriate. This will run July 13th through 15th. Now, as we know in the lunar cycle is 29 and a half-ish days. And so within the lunar cycle, the days of 13, 14, and 15, regardless of the calendar days, the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of the lunar cycle are always going to be our full moon. The full moon during Cancer season is going to be an especially potent full moon. And our modern pagan Wheel of the Year calendars oftentimes are not perfectly synced. They more just kind of pick dates that are relatively close to the time when the thing might be happening. And it's sort of a better to observe it and be slightly off on our days than to not observe it at all, is a little bit of the attitude there. So that's what that is. And from our Egyptian friends and ancestors, from July 12th to the 13th, we have the Feast of Hero-Eris, which is an older version of Horus, who is another iteration of the sun god. Horus and Apollo are synchronous at times in history. So this is a big solar festival. Also from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Dies Natalis of the Temple of the Two Pails. The dies natalis of temples was literally the birthday of the temple, the building itself, dedicated to whoever. And throughout the calendar year, we will talk about the dies natalis of a variety of different temples. The Romans were extraordinarily superstitious, we could say, from one perspective, or they were extraordinarily focused on the the living spirit that they perceived to be in everything. A door frame had a spirit, a chair had a spirit, the stove had a spirit. And so the temples that were built to hold the statues and sacred artifacts of various deities, the temples themselves also were thought to be kind of living entities. And so this is that. The two pales are these deity, is of shepherds, flocks, and livestock, regarded as male by some sources and female by others. Pales can be either singular or plural in Latin. And so it refers at least once to a pair of deities. Interesting. There's an actual festival to the Pales, or Pales, called Paria, which was celebrated in April. Cattle are driven through bonfire, etc., etc. But again, here's that dual thing kind of hovering in the background, right? Two deities, one deity, two deities, sometimes male, sometimes female. So intersex, non-binary, polygendered, etc., etc. Very similar to the way that we think of Gemini. Also, from our Roman ancestors, we have the feast of Juno Caprotinia. Juno is one of the great mother goddesses. And she also is like a ruler goddess. She is like a how do I want to say this? She's a sovereign goddess and often was looked to and inspired a lot of like female leadership symbolism. More stuff to be said about Juno in June than now. But nonetheless, she has a big feast day at this time of year. And also on this day, from our Latvian friends and family, we see the Sea and Fishermen's Fest. And there are similar festivals held at this time, either literally on the same day or basically at this time of year, globally. Russia, Ukraine, Tajikistan, Japan, etc., like lots and lots and lots of different places have already, are doing it, or are about to have festivals that are dedicated to the sea itself and maritime industries. As we already said, sea energy, ocean energy, and symbolism, really a big deal at this time of year. Maritime industries and maritime activities fall under the auspices of Gemini. Okay, so yet again, there we go. A little Gemini energy for you. All right, moving on to July 14th. From our Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have Ma'at's seat. And let me dig up my notes here. This is what I have written down. Establishing her, Ma'at, her seat and her hall in the divine court on the Zep Tepi today. Now, put on your tinfoil hats, kids. If you go online and you research the phrase Zep Tepi, it gets real weird, real fast. So let me just say that. There are a few places that actually have some good information and some well-researched, grounded in some level of fact information out there. But what I think is very interesting, the phrase Zep Tepi basically means first time, first peoples, and it's referring back to the beginning of creation for Egyptians, the way that they conceptualized time, and the beings that were at the beings and the stuff that was at the beginning of time. What I'm very fixated on, and maybe there is absolutely no connection whatsoever, but what I'm very fixated on is the word tepi. Because we know that there are archaeological sites called Karahan Tepe, Gobekli Tepe, just a few hundred miles to the north of Egypt. What? And those sites have been dated to approximately 9,000 to 11-ish thousand years ago, maybe even older than that. There may be other sites in the area that are even older than that. Did ancient Egyptians from 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago find those ancient sites from 10,000 years ago? And they were like, what is this? I don't know, but it's kind of cool to think about it, right? And to think about that ancient Egyptians and their civilization is closer in time to us than Egyptians were to those civilizations like Karahan Tepe and Gobekli Tepe. Wow. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. So, either way, this is the witnessing of Ma'at establishing her place at the beginning of time. No big deal. Just that. That's all we're doing with that. You know, pretty casual, right? Basic stuff. Basic magic stuff. Also on this day, from our United States Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Saint Kateri. I talk about this saint every year. This was a Native American, an indigenous woman who was brought into the Catholic faith. She died extremely young, and she was beatified, I believe is the word, and ultimately turned into a saint. I have a lot of thoughts about that. I see that mostly as just propaganda. I didn't know her, so I don't know how and why she made the choices that she made in her life, if she even made those choices in this lifetime or in her lifetime, right? We don't know. But we do know that there were a lot of indigenous people that were converted to Catholicism as a means of erasing their belief system and their culture. So just leave that there. Also on this day, from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Vitulatio, and this was an annual Thanksgiving celebration in ancient Rome, and it is, I love this, they don't really know why exactly they were doing it. It's held, after a couple of other festivals that are happening at the same time of year. Macrobius says that it marked a Roman retreat from the Etruscans during an invasion, and that the Vitulatio commemorated their comeback victory, maybe. Mostly it was marked as a day of religious prohibition, when people were supposed to refrain from undertaking any activity other than dealing with their basic necessities. But it is extremely common in researching these ancient Roman holidays to find that Romans had a ton of these festivals and holy days that they were very dedicated to observing, but they had no idea what the root of the festival actually was or why they were supposed to be doing what they were doing. They just knew that it was vitally important that they did it or bad shit was going to happen. Again, I don't know if that echoes anything that's going on in our current world, where groups of people are performing certain, gestures or saying certain things, but maybe they don't really know why they're doing it or what is supposed to be happening. Oh, Lord. Okay. Also on this day, we have the global holiday of Non-Binary Peoples Day. Now, hooray for that. Hooray to my non-binary people. Hello, we see you. All of you are a multitude. We see you. But isn't it cool that we've got these other festivals happening in the background? Like the Dies Natalis of the Temple of the Two Pails, right? Like, what? How cool is that? Very, very cool. All right, moving along to July 15th. There is a little bit of stuff going on July 15th. Now, I also want to note that have I? Oh, no, I haven't. Okay, I was going to say, I may have skipped over a couple of astrology transits, but no, I did not. Let us take a sip. Everybody, hydrate. Chat, posture check. Let's hydrate. Okay. So, do we have some astrology on July 15th? Yes, we do. We have a little bit of astrology. First and foremost, let us recognize that on July 15th, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Pollux. This is the divine twin of Castor and Pollux in the Gemini pairing and constellation. These are the divine twins that we see echoed all over the planet. There are divine twin myths all over the planet, and there are so many similarities between them. It is very surprising and cool. There, in fact, is a big old piece on my website under the Litha section. It might be under the Beltane section. Maybe it's both. What are you going to do? About divine twins. You basically go to my website and just search divine twins and the piece will come up. It's a lot of reading. It's a big old piece. But it is a lot of information about divine twin symbolism around the planet. But suffice to say here, sailors, horses, hello, connecting us to this Gemini symbolism. Wait, how are we still moving through the constellation of Gemini? Aren't we in Cancer? Precession of the equinoxes, baby. Zodiacal precession. We talk about it a lot. This is the big argument between, well, argument slash difference between Vedic astrology slash sidereal astrology and tropical astrology or Western astrology, what many of us popularly practice as our astrology. Yeah, we are still working through the stars of Gemini right now, and we are about to enter the sign of Cancer when we look at it from that point of view. The Vedic view, the sidereal view, is the astronomical view as well. Okay. What else is happening on this day? Mars conjunct Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus. So far, seems like everything's going to be cool, right? Like, hardly anything has happened, right? Seems like everything's going to be chill, everything's going to be fine. What I would say is, if you can stay out of the limelight on this day, you might. If you can stay home, if you can, avoid spicy events or situations, you might. Mars loves to argue about stuff, loves to fight to the point of getting violent. Mars likes to shed blood. It likes to sweat. It likes to be active. It's impatient. It's volatile. Uranus is shocking. It's explosive. It's wired for sound. It's moving as fast as lightning. It's very, very intense energy. And so, not every year, but about every 2.5-ish years, we're gonna have a conjunction between Mars and Uranus. It comes up. It's gonna happen. It's happened before. It's gonna happen again. And it's in the sign of Taurus. Taurus rules our physical body, the physical world, the earth itself, as well as financial systems, and also our values, and also the stuff that we think we need to be safe, the stuff that we think we need, as well as the stuff we actually need, the physical resources that we need to stay alive and stay safe. So that's a super fun combo, right? That's a super fun combo of words and phrases to all put together, given how, chill everything is here on Earth right now, literally, with a massive heat wave rolling across the country and the world. Given how chill everything is, I doubt anything of note is going to happen in or around this day. Okay. But yeah, on the personal level, what I will say is slow down. These kinds of conjunctions on the personal level are fender benders. They are breaking a toe as you're running through the house. Hi, I already did that. Send popsicles. I broke a toe. So just one of the best remedies is slow down. Take a breath. Let that person go in front of you in traffic. just try to muster whatever patience you can for yourself and for the people around you. If you need to go have a little tantrum, go out to a tree, holler at the tree, get it out of your system, come back. If it's safe and healthy for you, this is a great conjunction to slowly and calmly and patiently sweat it out. So, you know, take a walk or whatever, right? Like, do what you need to do to exorcise the energy. But know that in and around this day, the days leading up, clearly, and the day or ish too afterwards, folks are going to be feeling spicy, ramped up, eager for an argument, and not focused on the present, but very focused on the future. And so super distracted in the here and now. Coming back to my rant about getting very distracted by stuff that's happening in the world rather than focusing on what's real. So this is a great transit to continue to stay distracted and not focus on what's happening around you, and potentially get messed up because of that. So slow down, take a breath, center yourself, come into the now. You know, if you need to use a punching bag, go for it, my friend. Take it out on something that is appropriate. But if you are in a situation where things are feeling off, beat a hasty retreat. If you're having a conversation with somebody and they are starting to get angry at a level that is unsettling, walk away. Walk away. We can always, finish that argument at some other time. It's all right. It's all right. Okay. What else is going on at this time? We have the sun in Cancer squaring Chiron in Aries at 23 degrees. This is another funky transit. Chiron in Aries on its bad days is very centered in its wound. Look at what they did to me. Look at how I have been hurt. Look at how they attack me. And now I am justified in doing all of this terrible shit or acting in these terrible ways. The sun is our identity. It's our deep sense of self. And so this is very much an argument between the wound and the sense of self, and how we feel justified in being violent or being aggressive or lashing out at people in ways that are really like regressive and ultimately not healthy, ultimately not helpful. That might feel good in the moment, but ultimately not super great. This is another transit where I recommend slow down, take a breath, go for a walk. When you're starting to feel that energy, if and when you're starting to feel that energy ramp up for you, take a break, walk away. We can finish the conversation at some other time. We don't have to be right all the time. We don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. And this is a great transit that is going to potentially be a funky reminder of, oh, right, there are some people that I don't want to win that argument. I need to just get out of there and move along. Is there anything else I want to say about this stuff? Yeah, I mean, yes. Yes. When it comes to that Mars-Uranus, I'm looking at all the notes that I've got here. You know what? No. I've said what I needed to say about this. This is what else is happening on this day. July 15th. Jupiter enters its retrograde shadow at 11 degrees of Gemini. And Jupiter is going to station retrograde way out in October. So we've got months before Jupiter is actually staging retrograde. But whatever the work is that we're going to do while Jupiter is retrograde in Gemini, that work may begin to present itself as of July 15th. Jupiter, planet of expansion, planet of hot air, planet of exaggeration, but planet of fortune and abundance and twists of fate and things along those lines in the sign of Gemini, which is data, conversation, yapping, communication, learning, teaching, speaking, all of that stuff. I see this as a ramping up of the discourse in this country, fueled by the events of this weekend, couched within this Mars Uranus conjunction, Sun square Chiron situation. I think the rhetoric really starts to kick into overdrive on this day, and it's going to roll through into October when Jupiter, well, and probably beyond when Jupiter stations retrograde. Okay. What else is going on this day from our pagan friends and ancestors? We have the Feast of Rowana. Rowana, or Rowena, is that goddess. She is that lady. And connecting us to that wood and that work. The rowan tree is also known as the witch tree and the rune tree. This is another symbol of protection in Celtic tradition. Rowan trees are sometimes discovered growing near stone circles, also found growing near sacred sites like ley lines, and they are connected to the energy of earth lines known as dragon lines. Legends tell of a mystical race known as the Tuatha De Danann that imported the rowan tree from Tir Tanerge, which I'm sure that I mispronounced, I apologize, which means the lands of promise. When they journeyed across Ireland, the rowan tree berries dropped seeds, thus rowan trees began to sprout along the path. Rani is a Finnish rowan tree goddess or spirit, also known in the Same and Estonian mythology traditions. She composes the sacred northern spiritual and mystical powers of the rowan tree rituals. Rani is a great healer and knows how to eliminate pain. According to the Same, Madaraka, the first Aka, was mother of the tribe, goddess of women and children, she who gifts the people with their bodies. Women and girls belong to her, as do boys until they are declared men. And Madaraka is very popular among modern Same feminists. And she is deeply connected to this tree. According to Finnish creation and Same creation lore, Rane is disguised as a rowan tree. She is the Mother Earth's first tree sprouted. Rane first flew to Earth and observed that there were no trees or plants, and so she brought the rowan tree, etc., etc. There's a ton of information out there about those myths, and I highly recommend checking them out. Okay. What else is happening on this day? We have from our Catholic friends and ancestors Saint Vladimir's Day, and also from our English Catholic friends and ancestors, Saint Swithin's Day. And I'm not going to talk about Vladimir, but I am going to talk about Swithin for just a second. If you have been studying with me, you've heard this name before. If you are subscribed to my Patreon, you've got the, at the $9 level or higher, the Venus level and higher, you got the Litha workbook, the new Litha workbook, and you will see that Swithin's Day is another name for Litha or Midsummer or Gathering Day. Same. So who is Swithin? Swithin is another name for John. That's as in Saint John, John the Baptist, who is perhaps the brother or twin to Jesus. And when is Swithin's Day? It's right here near summer solstice. And when does Jesus have his big festival? Oh, right, winter solstice. Huh, wild, weird, crazy. Saint Swithin is the patron saint of Windsor? No, I'm going to get that wrong. Winchester Cathedral, which was one of the biggest cathedrals of its kind in Europe. And lots of holy stuff happening therein. All right, too much to talk about. We're going to move on. Oh, so much. Okay. Also on this day from our Egyptian friends and ancestors, ritual water for those in the next world. And this is a part of a big complex of festivals that are taking place at this time of year that are wrapping up the old year for Egyptians. We are coming to the end of the calendar year for ancient Egyptians. And so this would have been an offering of cooling water to those in the lands of the dead and in the next world. This is also kind of connecting us back to the Zep Tepi, those at the beginning of time type stuff that's going on. Okay. Hydrate, people. July 16th, we have Mercury entering its retrograde shadow at 21 degrees of Leo. Yes, 2 planets in a row entering their retrograde shadow, and obviously the next Mercury retrograde is going to be a hell of a lot sooner than that Jupiter retrograde way out in October. Mercury will be stationing retrograde August 4th, just 3 days after our next Sabbat, Lunasa. We will talk about the Mercury retrograde cycle a little closer to it in the next couple of weeks. This retrograde cycle, I will say in advance, I think has the potential to be extremely productive for us on the individual level. Will there be funky parts of it? Yeah, sure, probably. But I also think that there's going to be some really cool parts and some very, very useful parts. Opportunities to do relationship work, opportunities for healing the ego, opportunities for just like really getting dialed in on where we are, where we've been, and where we're trying to go. Very, very helpful. I think it's going to be a very helpful retrograde. Just putting that out there. I know some Mercury retrogrades are like, whatever. Some Mercury retrogrades are like, dear God. I think this is actually going to be one that's very helpful. That's my opinion. We'll talk about it more there. But just like with the Jupiter retrograde, the work that we are going to do in that retrograde cycle may start to show up for you now. All right, getting into the holy days of July 16th, running from July 16th to the 26th this year. From our Vodun friends and ancestors, we have Soto. I apologize again if I'm mispronouncing that. But this is a festival dedicated to a waterfall, but a waterfall that is thought of as the holy site of, and actually the embodiment of, the Virgin Mary / Erzuli Dentor, which is a Vodun Loa. And in some accounts, there have been appearances of these goddesses there, and there is a huge festival that takes place at this waterfall. But again, you know, here's water energy, right? This beautiful waterfall. There's a big festival that happens there every year, and a pilgrimage, and folks go and hang out and party. There's a Eucharist that's held there, but as well, the Vodun and Voodoo practitioners also do their thing. And of course, there's a heck of a lot of overlap between those two systems. Devotional activity, like bathing in the waters of the falls and asking for favors from the Virgin or Erzuli, or both. And the water is also sacred to the Loa Damballa and Aida Wedo, excuse me. And those deities also have made appearances at this waterfall. So, really, really cool. There are baptisms there, religious gatherings, etc., etc. Also on this day, from our Yoruba friends and ancestors, are feasts dedicated to Nana Baluku. Nana Baluku is also known as Nana Buruku and Nana Buku, and she is the female supreme being in the West African traditional religion of the Fon people and the Iwe people. She is one of the most influential deities in West African theology, and she's shared by many ethnic groups. And she's described differently by different groups, but ultimately she is the Mother Supreme. She is the supreme creator. She gives birth to the moon spirit, Mawu, the sun spirit, Lisa, and all of the universe. No big deal, just literally birthing the universe, you know, as you do as a mom, right? She is the primary creator, Mawu Lisa. The secondary creator in the theology based on these is called Voodoo or Vodun or Vodun. etc., etc. Cool stuff going on this day with our water symbolism and all of the good things. What else do we have on this day? From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the celebration of the justification, and in parentheses, I have apotheosis or the deification of Imhotep. And Imhotep was a Egyptian priest who may have been responsible for like building some of the step pyramids that from ancient Egypt. But if I understand the history correctly, this was a human that ultimately was deified and became, an entity in his own right. But in his lifetime, not only is he credited with potentially building some of those pyramids, he was a priest of the sun god Ra, and he served at Heliopolis. And of course, we have the Ludi Apollinaires, and we have some other Apollo stuff happening later in the week that we'll talk about in just a second. And so, here is a priest dedicated to worshiping the sun god who has multiple festivals happening this week. And from our Catholic pagan friends and ancestors on the 16th, we have the Feast of Our Lady of Einsidelnd. And this is one of many, many, many black Madonnas that are found throughout Europe. As we move out of Cancer season, out of Litha, and into Lunasad or Lunasa season, August, and then into September and Virgo season, we are going to see a huge cluster of holy days dedicated to Black Madonnas. And Black Madonnas are these very interesting icons that, in my opinion, white Catholics don't really know what to do with, don't really know how to handle her. They are often described as regular old Virgin Mary statues that would have had pure white as snow alabaster skin, but have somehow become super dark thanks to like the soot from candles and incense and or the paint that was on them, the varnish, oxidized over time and her skin grew darker, or maybe she's just black. Maybe she's just black. Given that we do have Kali celebrations, who we know is also a pitch black goddess, not a dark-skinned goddess, black. She's a black goddess, but she's also a dark-skinned goddess, to be accurate. Happening at this time of year, duh. Also, that the Virgin Mary would have been depicted as a black goddess, duh. It makes so much sense. Especially when we get deeper into the summer and we think about the heat of the sun burning things. We also think about Virgo energy, and, we don't have time or space to get into it right now, but there is a lot of very obvious connection between Black Madonnas and Virgo energy. So, just putting that out there. She's got her thing going on this day. All right. And on this day, we have the global celebration of drag. It is Drag Day on July 16th. So, pop on a lace front, pop on a lash. Okay, get your platforms out and twirl for the kids, could you please? Because these dollars are burning a hole in my pocket. So, no, actually, what I would say is, on this day or during this week, go support your local drag show. Please and thank you. It is a holy act, as far as I am concerned. Now, hooray for drag, and also, we know that drag connects deeply to the theater of ritual, and we know that drag connects deeply to shamanic and ritualistic forms of transformation and shedding skin and shifting between dimensions. And so drag truly is a sacred art form and a holy art form because it reminds us of those liminal spaces where we can have a a kitten heel in multiple dimensions. Go support your local drag show. Drag queens and drag kings are out there saving lives right now. Like, not actually exaggeration, literal. And drag is one of the performance arts and one of the forms of self expression that is heavily under attack right now in America. So go support your local drag show. Queens, kings, sovereigns, what have you. Go, go, go do it. Go do it. Okay. July 17th, we have our gibbous moon in Sagittarius at 10 degrees. It will be exact at 2:33 p.m. Pacific Standard Time later in the day around and the next day around the rest of the planet. TLDR, when we're hanging out with the gibbous moon in Sag, it is a great time to put our screens down and do some research. Reading a book in particular, but not with an agenda in mind necessarily. This is a great day for acquiring information and keeping an open mind and just like, what could I learn about today? What more can I learn on a topic? But not thinking, oh, I have an idea or I have an angle, right? I have an agenda and I'm going to acquire information to back up my agenda. That is not utilizing this moon to its best effect. But there is a quote from Moon Phase Astrology by Raven Caldera, who I speak about this book a lot when we talk about these lunar phases. And I want to say this in light, again, of all of the wild-ass political shit that is happening in our country and around the world, to this effect of this gibbous moon in Sagittarius energy around research and data and stuff like this. And this is from the writer Alfred Korzybski. There are two ways to slide easily through life: to believe everything or to doubt everything. Both ways save us from thinking. And I just wanted to kind of give you that as a touchstone for this week when we are encountering the wild fucking amounts of propaganda, which we are about to have to suffer, as well as the wild amount of voices that are speaking truth to power and being drowned out by agendas and propaganda and conspiracy theories on all sides of conversations that are happening. Thinking, critical thinking it's like a fucking superpower right now, and I want you to engage in it. Thinking about nothing is escapism. Questioning everything and just believing everything wholesale also is escaping. Finding the critical thinking path between the two extremes, right? Calling on Holly energy for support, our plant ally, Holly Tree, at this time, to help us find the balance between the light and the dark and to find the middle pathway through the extremes. That stuff. Okay. Also on this day, in sidereal astrology, the sun enters Cancer. So yes, the sun in astronomy and these other astro systems has actually been moving through the sign of Gemini up until now. It is only here, July 17th, that the sun actually enters the portion of the sky that we call Cancer, and all of the stars therein. Tropical astrology, we're just about to enter Leo. I know, it gets a little confusing, but it's not too bad. You'll get it after a while. Also starting off on this day and running through August 24th, we have the Perseid meteor showers, and we are coming up on a full moon next week, so now is not a great time for going meteor shower hunting, but a couple of weeks after that, like deeper towards Lunasa, actually is close to when we're going to have our next new moon. So that time period, the beginning of August, is going to be a great time period for going and hunting for meteors. I don't know if you have any wishes. I certainly do. So we'll have plenty of falling stars to wish upon coming up here pretty shortly. Okay, let's get into this. July 17th, excuse me, July 18th, we have the helical rising of the fixed star Procyon. Procyon is found within the Canis, or the dog constellation. It is very near Sirius, the dog star. Boy howdy, is there a lot of wild shit on the internet connected to that star. I kind of go off on a rant about Sirius every year. We'll talk about Sirius next week. But TLDR and Procyon, violence. Hey, cool, exciting. Not like we already don't have a whole bunch of indicators for that. And sudden success and then disaster. So, this is also a key element of working with the Chariot card. The Chariot card also speaks to swift victory and swift defeat. So, back to that message at the beginning of the week with Mars and Uranus. Slow down, take a breath, be present in the moment. We don't need swift victory or swift defeat if we can have long-lasting peace. Right? Right? Okay. Moving on, the 17th, excuse me, the 18th, I don't know why my brain keeps going back to the 17th, the 18th, we also have, running from July 18th through the 20th, praise of Mut from our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, as well as the Eye of Horus returning complete. And so we've already talked about who Horus is and all of that good stuff. Let me say that Mut is yet another mother goddess, deep mega creator goddess, who is also connected to water. From our friends at Wikipedia, where I've been reading a lot of the stuff that I've read to you today or talked about today, Mut was considered, or is considered, a primal deity associated with the primordial waters of Nu, from which everything in the world was born. Mut was sometimes said to have given birth to the world through parthenogenesis. We're big fans of parthenogenesis here on the podcast. But more often than not, she was said to have a husband, Amun-Ra, our solar deity who's doing his thing at this time of year. Lots more could be said about her. We just don't have time. But she is very, very cool. Her name means mother in the ancient Egyptian language. So, dope lady. Good old Mut. And the Eye of Horus returns complete. We've talked about Horus already. And so this is, the Eye of Horus is the sun. And again, these are like wrapping up the old calendar year type holidays that are happening for ancient Egyptians at this time of year. All right. July 19th through August 1st, we have the Anach Taltean from our ancient Irish pagan friends and ancestors. And these are the Taltean games that I mentioned previously. And we will talk about them a little bit more getting closer to Lunasa, because they really are kind of connected more with Lunasa. Also on this day, from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Jaya Parvati Puja, which runs from July 19th through the 25th this year. And pujas are just like big festivals, and every day there are offerings and prayers and celebrations done, and you like do different stuff every day. There's like different steps of things that you do. Parvati is the Hindu goddess of power, energy, nourishment, love, beauty, devotion, and motherhood. In her complete form, she is a physical representation of the Mahadevi, who is the primordial power behind the creation of the universe. And so she is a creator and a destroyer. She is also married to Shiva, but she is a primordial goddess. So here again, we have these primordial goddesses being celebrated and worshipped in some of these incredibly old traditions right here in the heart of Cancer season, whether we're looking at that from tropical astrology and it's Cancer season, or we're looking at that from Vedic and sidereal astrology / astronomy. and the sun just entering Cancer. Cancer, of course, being the sign of, mothering and motherhood. Whatever that word means for you, there is a lot of mother symbolism connected to the sign of Cancer. So we have, multiple of these primordial mother goddesses being revered at this time. Potent stuff, man. It's really, really cool. It's just blows me away every time I every time I sit down to do my work. I'm just like, okay, here we go. It's still fucking wild, isn't it? Um, from our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, one, we see in ancient Egypt, the Nile begins to rise. This coincided with the heliacal rising of the fixed star Sirius every year, and this was the geo indicator and the astro indicator to ancient Egyptians that the old year was closing out and the new year was here to be witnessed. Um, and the Nile rising was a miraculous and pivotal event in ancient Egyptian life because, that was some dry land. Even when it was very, like, much more fertile than it is now, it was a very arid place on Earth. And so when the Nile would flood, it would crest its banks and spill over into the farmlands and soak the farmlands so that they could grow for the rest of the year. And it kicked off the new growth cycle that could take place as the sun's energy began to wane and the heat began to back off. And there's a ton of rituals and festivals around the Nile rising and cresting its banks. Um, and yeah, lots of stuff connected to it. It doesn't happen anymore because of the Aswan Dam. Towards the southern end of the Nile, the Aswan Dam, I think it's towards the southern end. The Aswan Dam was installed at some point, and now the Nile doesn't do its thing anymore. It doesn't do this annual cycle anymore, which had to be a shock to the land and the spirits of the land when that stuff happened, a few years ago, a few decades ago. But yeah, that stuff. Okay. Also, for our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the cleaning and renewing of the noble ones and the feast of Menhui. Menhui is also pronounced Menhit, and Menhit was originally a Nubian lion goddess of war in the kingdom of Kush, who was regarded as a tutelary and sun goddess. Her name either means she who sacrifices or she who massacres. As Menhit, she is associated with the sun, but as Mekhit, she is associated with the moon. And she also is almost always depicted as a lioness with a solar disk and a Uraeus symbol, or the serpent symbol, above her head, which is exactly how Sekhmet is depicted as well, who is a very intense solar goddess who is doing her thing at this time of year and in the next, couple of weeks, couple of months. Last but not least, for July 19th, from our ancient Roman friends and ancestors, we have the last day of the Ludi Apollinaires, so the end of the games that we talked about towards the beginning of the holy days. And this would end with a sacrifice at the Temple of Apollo in the Campus Martius, or Martius. So this was a temple dedicated to the sun god Apollo, which you've already had a whole bunch of that this week. But within the campus dedicated to Mars, god of war. And sacrifices would be made to both the sun god and Mars, this god of war. Interesting that we have this Mars-Uranus conjunction at the beginning of the week with this sacrifice to Mars towards the end of the week, so that's an interesting synchronicity. But I want to remind you that in Mars's earliest days, Mars was not a war god. Mars was a god of agriculture. What? Wait a minute. Yeah. A god of farming. And here we have on this same day the Nile beginning to rise, which is going to flood, water symbolism, flood the farmlands. And then we have this connection, which I wonder if even the Romans were making that connection. Again, I don't know that I'm right. I just think it's an interesting synchronicity. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, as we love to say here on the podcast. All right. Last but not least, who else do we have here? We've got just a few more days to go through. All right, 7:20. Mars enters Gemini. Okay, Geminis, grip thy chonies, okay? You have Mars and Jupiter in your sign. So first and foremost, quit it. Okay? Secondly, it is you. You're the problem. All right? Third, we love you, but dear God, it's a lot. Could this be fame and fortune for all Geminis? Sure, maybe, probably not. Will it bring a lot of attention to you, Geminis, and Gemini placements? Yeah, probably. Mars likes to argue. It likes to fight about stuff. It likes to be first. It's very impatient. It likes to be hot. It likes to be aggressive. It's competitive. Jupiter is expansive and fortuitous and philosophical, but it's also very dedicated to exaggerating, very dedicated to blowing stuff up, and is a planet of fate and fortune, which sometimes is in our favor and sometimes is not. So that's a spicy combo of stuff, right? Take it easy. Don't overextend yourself. I think that this is a combination that can easily lend to a lot of eagerness to want to say yes and to want to overextend yourself and overpromise. I don't know if there's any Geminis out there that sounds familiar for, but just saying. Also, all of us have Gemini somewhere in our chart. So I would definitely recommend taking a second to glance at your natal chart if you're into that kind of thing. I don't know if you like do witchcraft or whatever, but check it out. And to see where is Gemini in your natal chart. Mars and Jupiter are both hanging out in this portion of your natal chart. So there could be some extra intensity, some extra heat, some extra attention, some extra bigness, some extra expansion, some extra fortune that occurs here. Also, maybe we might be getting a little impatient with the issues of our life that are covered in this portion of our natal chart. Or we might be feeling extra aggressive or competitive about stuff in that portion of our life. So just witness it, journal about it, get curious about it, check into it. You could also, get a reading with an astrologer and see what that stuff means for you. Anyways, generally speaking, what are we doing with Mars in Gemini? We're running around and being crazy. We're yapping a lot. It's a lot of running at the mouth. To better and ill ends. In the light of all of the stuff that's going on around the planet, I unfortunately think that this is going to ramp up a lot of war and violence rhetoric and talk. Not that there isn't a whole bunch of that already, but I could definitely see there being some doubling down. Globally, throughout time, August is the month that we have seen the most wars and the most wartime activity. So, there's that exciting piece of the puzzle. All right. Also on this day, from our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the feast of Saint Margaret / Margaret the Virgin. Margaret of Antioch, Saint Marina or Marina, the great martyr. So right off the jump, we see in her name Saint Marina connected to water and oceanic stuff. But what I think is very interesting, because there's a lot of things that we could say about her, we just don't really have the time to go into everything with this lady. One, she is one of the 14 holy helpers. That is one of the saints that Saint Joan of Arc worked with. Two, she oversees pregnant women, nurses, all of that kind of stuff. And three, She was ultimately beheaded when she was killed. She was ultimately decapitated. And decapitations are a sacred form of death that we see with a bunch of the solar deities and god king deity type archetypal figures at this time of year. There's a whole lot of stuff happening with various entities that have a wound to the neck that is sometimes just a wound to the neck, but sometimes also ramps all the way up to literal decapitation. So very interesting that she also has that connection with her stuff. There's other cool things that could be said about her. There's no time. Okay. Also, on this day, from our Lithuanian friends and ancestors, we have the binding of the wreaths. And this is a little festival within a giant complex of festivals that are happening over the course of several weeks around summer solstice stuff. There is a boatload of stuff, and all of it has to do with collecting herbs and doing magical things with those herbs. So many of these things collected on the nights dedicated to St. John, or specifically summer solstice, which are just like a couple days off from each other. And these wreaths or these bunches of herbs, so many different things done with them. One of them was wrapping them into wreaths. It was believed that the wreaths would concentrate the perpetual life force, and literally became this symbol of like infinity, of this ring of plant life. And they became symbols of immortality and life. There are a ton of rituals and spellcrafting pieces associated with wreaths during the various summer solstice festivals that take place at this time of year for Lithuanians and other folks in that region. Just a metric ton of stuff. Like, that piece could be its own class. It's really a lot. Okay. Also on this day, from our Slavic friends and ancestors, we have Perun's Day. Perun is the highest god in the Slavic pantheon, and he is a god of the sky, thunder, lightning, storms, rain, law, war, fertility, and oak trees. So lots and lots of stuff that we've already been talking about, right? Lots of stuff that we've already been talking about. He also had something to do with horses and carts. So there's our horse stuff, weaponry and things like that. This is another one where there's just, it's a huge rabbit hole to go down when we talk about Perun at this time of year. But he was the creator of lightning. He's the only lord to do it all. To him do they sacrifice an ox and a sacrificial animals, etc., etc. And to this day, the word Perun in a number of Slavic languages means thunder or lightning bolt. Powerful stuff. From our Yoruba friends and ancestors, this day is also the feast of Boromu. And who is Boromu? Boromu is one of two brothers. The other one is Boronsia. And again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing their names. These were brother deities who are minor, or I shouldn't say were, they are, minor orishas belonging to the Yoruba pantheon. And so here we have brothers. Sometimes they're described as twins, but sometimes they're just brothers. But here's our some echoing of Gemini stuff in there. And Boromu was connected to the human skeleton and closely linked to death. He is the holy protector of the desert sand, and he lived in cemeteries, and he learned to predict the future for humans. And his brother, Brosia, manifests themselves or itself through tornadoes, and its strength is so brutal that it's capable of devastating entire forests in its path. So, interesting stuff there. connecting to weather, connecting to potentially lightning and stuff, but also death, skeleton imagery, interesting stuff. Okay. And not quite last, not quite least, from our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the review of the subjects of the Golden One. This is again hearkening back to these solar festivals that are happening at this time of year that are wrapping up the old calendar year, saying thank you and please don't kill us to the overwhelming sun energy that is happening for ancient Egyptians, and getting ready to induct in the new calendar year. Also on this day, we have a festival dedicated to Horus Min of Apollonopolis Parva. And so Apollonopolis was a city dedicated to Apollo, aka Heliopolis, aka the sun. So there's some more of that stuff. And Horus Min was a combination of Horus, who we've talked about multiple times, and a god named Min. And Min is a fun Egyptian deity to work with because my dude just has a massive erection. That's really what he's doing. He's dressed all in white, which is a very common symbol that we see during Litha season and summer solstice season. Deities and archetypes dressed all in white, colorless brilliance around their head, white brilliance, colorless brilliance around their head. So homeboy here is dressed all in white with a rippin' boner. So what's up with that? Well, the Egyptians were way less prudish about that sort of thing than we are. And they really celebrated virility and fertility as energies that any and all genders could express. So male deities as vehicles for fertility and potency were just as common as female deities representing fertility and potency. And again, remember, we have the Nile cresting the banks at this time and flooding the farmlands, right? So here comes this virile, potent homeboy that's like, let's spill some seed onto the lands and plant the next cycle of crops. And that is literally what's going on. Male gods of virility, like Osiris and Min, were very popular during this time. And again, fertility not only associated with women, men and other genders were just as responsible for this goodness. This was a god of male sexual potency. He was honored during this time period, but literally was expected to sow his seed and literally planting seeds. And then at the beginning of the harvest season, his image was taken out of the temple and brought into the fields and paraded about and literally like shown to the plants, like, do it, do it, do it. Like, let's get this going. One of my favorite parts of the Min festival, they would bless the harvest. They played games naked in his honor, so hooray for naked. Also, we have like National Nudity Day at this time of year in our modern sacred holidays. We have National Skinny Dipping Day during this week as well, so hello, right? Like, everything old is new again. But also games, right? Festivals that incorporated these games. We see it from the Romans, we see it from our Celtic friends and ancestors. Like, there's something here about competition, and we're going to get more and more into that competition energy as we get into Lunasa season. But most importantly, the center of the festival was the climbing of a huge pole. Come on. What? Give me that old time religion, baby. That's what I'm talking about. That's so good. And so it was a big 4-day festival. Sounds like folks were having a great time. Sounds like folks were having a fantastic time. And that's what's up. Okay. White bull, barbed arrows, beds of lettuce. They were just getting wild out there with the lettuce. You know what I mean? Like, come on. No, but really, Egyptian lettuce was tall, straight, and released a milk-like sap when rubbed. So, I'm just going to leave you with that. Great week for a BLT. You can have whatever you want for the bacon, right? Last but not least, from our Roman friends and ancestors, Mercatus begins. And I believe that this is the second Mercatus of the year. The Mercatus were literally market days or days of enforced shopping. We gotta love the Romans. I mean, and it's so dialed in. Is your email absolutely filled with summer sale, right? It's literally that. The Mercati, ugh, were these multi-day shopping events that were enforced by the Roman government. Basically, they would look at the populace and say, you all have been observing religion too hard, and you've been dallying in your festivals too hard. We need you to come into the city and spend money. That's literally what it is. And they would have circuses, and they would have all this entertainment and all these distractions and all of this stuff to like draw people back to the cities and to city life. I don't know if any of that sounds familiar to anybody out there. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And of course, the Mercatus days were always dedicated to Mercury, who is the ruling deity of Gemini. So there you go. All right. This podcast has been extremely long, so I'm going to just scooch through this last little bit of stuff. Our tools for this week, tarot-wise, anyways, we can work with the Chariot card. We certainly have had a variety of connections to the Chariot card. The Chariot card connects us to the sign of Cancer, so hanging out with the Chariot card this week makes a lot of sense. Also, we are in the third decan of Cancer, so the third portion, the last 10 degrees of Cancer during this week, and the tarot card that connects to that is the Four of Cups. And I actually think that the Four of Cups might even be more dialed in for working with, given that it is a card of like, okay, so I've got conflicting feelings, and I'm having to kind of wrangle with like what I'm feeling internally versus what's happening in the physical world, and how do I sit with all of this stuff and all of that. So, that might be very appropriate for the work that we're doing this week with the world events and with these Chiron transits that we're experiencing. But also, halfway through the week, we have the moon traveling through the sign of Sagittarius, and we can work with the Nine of Wands every time the moon is hanging out in Sagittarius. And so the Nine of Wands is a great card and a difficult card at the same time. Hi, again, Earth 2024. Great and difficult all at the same time. Because the Nine of Wands is a point when we are potentially really struggling with, who does the world want me to be? I have so many options and so many directions that I can push my energy in. Who the fuck am I? Who am I trying to be in this life? Why am I trying to be that person in this life? Like, what is this for? What is all of this struggle with identity for? And I think that a week like this and events like this, like what we've already experienced and might be experiencing in this coming week, as well as the global events around us, really are challenging. Like, who am I, right? What is it to be an American? What is it to be a person that lives in the quote-unquote West? What is it to be a person who lives in the global North, if you are listening to me there? And what do these empires ask of me? As a child of these empires, what roles am I supposed to be playing? And how does that conflict with who I want to be and who I see myself as and what I would like to be in the future? The Suit of Wands ultimately is asking us to do really tough work around, what is the torch that I carry in this lifetime? What is the enlightenment that I bring? What is the brilliance that I bring? And that is a deep question at Litha, too. How do I shine? How am I a sun in the lives of the people around me? What is the warmth that I bring? What is the protection that I bring? What is the brilliance that I bring? Litha season asks us to step into our badassery. And a lot of us shy away from accepting where we are badasses, where we are really good at something, where we are just naturally awesome at stuff. And everybody has something like that in their life. Some of us have multiple places in our life where we are just really good at stuff. We just have a natural essence about ourselves that is inclined to that thing. And a lot of us shy away from that. And on the surface of it, it's like, oh, I don't want the attention, or oh, I'm not that great, blah, blah, blah. But underneath it, let's be real. We don't want the responsibility of being that person for community. That's what's up. I'm going to just pause so you can sit with that for a second. Yeah, I know. I'm coming at you at the end of the podcast. I'm coming at you, but here it is. That is a big part, I think, sometimes of why we shy away from that stuff that we know that we do well. The things that we know that we excel at, the things that we know delight the people around us when we do it or we say it or we are it. It's because we don't want the responsibility. But in fact, this is the season of accepting the responsibility. So, if that's something that you're struggling with as we're moving through this portion of the wheel, maybe hang out with the Nine of Wands for a little while and recognize all the places where society is asking you to fill these roles that do not feel authentic to you, and how that's beating you up, how that's running you ragged. And then also take some time to recognize all of the roles and all of the ways that you could be sharing your brilliance that are naturally, within you. And where you shy away from that stuff because you're afraid of stepping into that power, and you're afraid of accepting, or reticent, too is fair, reticent to accept the responsibility of being that badass. But my friends, if there was ever a time in the history of this species where each and every single one of us needs to step into being our most glorious selves and bringing that light and that heat and that warmth, that protection, that love into our own lives and into the lives of our friends, our family, our community members, now, my heathens, now is absolutely that time. Our species needs us now. It is time, lovingly, respectfully, to get the fuck over yourself and step into your power and begin to wear it like a golden, brilliant mantle around your shoulders. That's all. That's all we're doing this week. Just that. I'm not going to give you any other homework like spell casting or any of that kind of stuff. I want you to just sit with these ideas. Again, I think we're probably going to get pummeled with a lot of propaganda this week. Not that that's unusual, but I think they're going to ramp it up pretty hardcore this week. So take care of yourself. Cut back on your screen time. Breathe. Go for walks. Meditate. Make art. Dance. Love yourself. Connect with the people that are around you. COVID is ramping up again. The plague is here also. Multiple cases of the plague have showed up. Dengue fever and a few other things have shown up. So put your masks back on. I know, big surprise. But hey, put your masks back on if you're hanging out indoors. Be responsible. And be that brilliant sun that you know that you are. Stop hiding your light. It's time to shine. Blessed be witches.